Next, from Springfield, we talked to Dave Seiler, Democratic candidate for state representative for the 107th District. This runs about 10 minutes.
Dave Seiler, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel. You are the Democratic candidate running for state representative in the 107th District, which is now held by John Cavaletto, and that's down in the Effingham area.
Right.
What prompted you to run for the state legislature?
You know, it was an open seat. I'm a history teacher, government teacher, and I've been interested in government for a long time. I used to be the county chairman for the Effingham County Democrats, and so I was observing what was going on, and I saw that Cavaletto was retiring, and so I talked to 20, 25 people, tried to twist some arms and get people to run, and I guess I'm not a good arm twister because nobody else would do it. So I thought, well, somebody's got to. And so I went ahead and got the signatures, and in about the month of November, I spent that time, and I ended up getting 700 signatures, and I got on the ballot, and so I'm the candidate. So, yeah, but, you know, I felt like somebody has to represent these other points of view. Our area has been Republican dominated for a long time, you know, and the folks need to hear what the Democrats have to say, because there's other ideas out there that I think they need to hear, and it's just the way democracy works.
And I would agree with you. We can't have elections if we just got no one running, right?
Exactly,
So
right.
I always give credit to people who get off the couch and go out and put themselves out there. It's not an easy thing to do. What are some of the issues that you want to champion that you thought were not being championed?
Sure. You know, one of my things I put on my cards is that as a history teacher, I know that Illinois used to work better than it does today. And so, you know, what lessons can we learn from history? And, you know, one of the things that I'm trying to draw attention to is actually just the structural way of how we actually do business in Illinois. Before 1980, we used to elect 3 representatives from each district, and then we had the cutback amendment that reduced us down to the single member districts like we have now. And I'm convinced that that's when we kind of went off the rails. We actually started to go, because what that did, it consolidated power in Springfield. It lessened democracy across the state. And I think we should consider going back to a model that's similar to that, because, you know, but it's a hard sell. I mean, it's a big deal you have to change the Constitution. So in a big picture, I like that idea, and I'm trying to draw attention to that. But on a daily basis, you know, as far as regular issues, I've been a labor union member for 30 years. You know, I'm a teacher. I've been a member of the teacher unions. And so one of the things that I believe in is that we have a model for helping people get to the middle class, and that's the labor unions. No matter whether it's the teachers union, whether it's the IBEW, whatever it is, I think that that's a model, and so I champion that model as well. So I welcome their support, and I support them back. I'm an educator, so education issues. You know, I think what Governor Rauner's budget. What the problem with the budget has done has decimated, and I don't want to say decimated, but it's really negatively impacted higher education across the state of Illinois, and we can't be that way. We can't do that, and we've got to invest into back to our state with higher education. So, you know, those are the issues I'm trying to bring attention to. Ultimately, you know, we have to look at the budget and how we pay these things, and, you know, and I'm trying to bring the idea that, you know what, we have to consider a progressive income tax of some sort. And what's that look like? Well, and people don't even really maybe understand it, but it's got to be explained to people and said, this is a practical solution that actually is one of the ways out of our problems.
So a lot of people would say, well, you know, tax, we can't pay any more taxes. One of the real crushing, I think everyone would more or less agree with, one of the crushing taxes in Illinois is the property tax, which is not based on your ability to pay that tax as compared to an income tax. Have you looked at or consider as a part of your plan that maybe we would have raise some taxes higher, a sales tax, maybe even the income tax, which was just raised, but Illinois' income tax is still low relative to surrounding states. But some way of finding the ability to then offer property tax relief so people aren't being taxed out of their homes.
Right. I think that's worth. I just listened to a session where Representative Markowitz talked about that idea of providing property tax relief. It's not a new idea either. Don Clark Netsch proposed that back in 1990 or 94, I guess it was, and then Jim Edgar poo-pooed the idea and then came up and said, "Oh wait, that's a good idea." So, you know, this is an idea that's been out there for a long time, and certainly I think, yeah, property taxes are a horrible way to actually do this. So, I think that we should, if we can all get to the table and talk about these things in an honest fashion, there are solutions that are there, and we just have to have the trust in each other to do that. So,
On the pension issue, which is also one of the big problems facing the state, and as a teacher you have a pension, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, I've sometimes thought it's ironic in that as the cost of pensions go up, and the teacher's retirement system is about 45% of the overall cost, so almost half of it, that it's ironic that that pressure of pensions, financial pressure that's been growing, state pays about $8.5 billion right now just for this year's payment, that's part of what's been crushing the funding of education over the years, both at higher ed, which has been severely cut over the last 18 years or so, and then even local K-12 education, I should say, has been cut back until just about in the last year. What are your thoughts on just how do we address that pension?
Well, and as a history teacher, I got to point out that part of the problem is that we passed on funding it in the past when we were supposed to fund it. We had pension holidays, and we created the problem then. So we paid that money for something else back then. So, but that doesn't lessen the problem that we have now. I mean, obviously, we still have the problem today. So part of one of the things that I have proposed, one of the things that I think we need to consider is taxing pensions. That is has to be on the table, but in conjunction with a graduated income tax, because the average pension is actually not that much money. It's like $30,000-$40,000, I think, is what IFT, and it may be around that, but it's not a big one. I don't think an increase in taxes on those folks makes sense. Okay, so that's why you have to do a graduated income tax at the same time as you do, and if you did that with the taxing of the pensions, because then the higher income earners who are getting a pension and they're getting a 3% COLA on that can afford to pay more in terms of the income tax, and I think that's part of the way out of this hole as well. So.
And before we close out, have you had a chance to walk the district and talk to people, and if so, what kind of feedback, what's on the minds of the voters?
Oh, I think they are glad to have somebody to have another point of view out there. They're happy that somebody's actually working it. That's really the biggest response I've had is like, hey, where you been for the last 10 years? I'm like, well, but it's one of those things. It's a hard district, and so they're happy to see that there are different points of view out there. That's why we have elections. I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but I'm excited and I'm interested to see. It's been fun so far. So yeah.
Dave Seiler, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.